Hey, what's going on, guys? Just want to hop on here real quick and kind of go over the latest and greatest with the no prep car. I know it's kind of been a little bit since I posted a video, so thought I've done enough stuff, or I guess changed enough things to give a status on the car. So I'm still running the Nova body. Only thing I did change was this is not a painted body. This is their Proline's tough body. So obviously I don't have to worry about if I scratch something, it doesn't chip the paint. I will say what I've noticed, obviously, since it's not a painted body, you lose a little bit of that thickness. This body is relatively thin compared to even just the clear body out of the bag. So just my experiences from that. So I guess we can start a little bit on the outside. The main thing that I did on the rear was add on I guess fatter sides of the wing, just to kind of keep it a little more straight. I did have a more low profile wing, which worked fine. I didn't have any issues, but what I've noticed is with a bigger wing, it definitely keeps it more straight and true going down the street. And probably the next big thing is I am running currently some DE wheels and tires. So these are the Sprint Gambler. They're little sprint car wheels, and then the DE Clay Compound mini slicks. They do have a D30, which is like their ultra soft, and their D40, which is their just a regular soft. But yeah, these they hook great. A lot of people do vent holes in the tires and the wheels. But for me, I just mounted them up. Didn't really have a whole lot to do with that. But what I was running on here were these J Concepts Hotties, and these are their tactical wheels. This is your standard 2.2, 3.0 wheel and tire combo, which works great. Obviously, it should have a higher mile an hour, being a lot taller than the DE tires. But with these are actually belted. And what I did was I actually took them back apart and then took the foams out. So they're still a full tire, but there's just no foam in them. A lot of guys were doing this on the reactions, and I didn't see a whole lot of folks doing it to the Hotties. Obviously, the mechanics are going to be about the same. If you have a belted tire, it really doesn't matter. So I just, so obviously you can see how much give there is there. But it didn't affect the performance at all. It still ran totally fine. Obviously it should dig a little bit more with the foam in here. Obviously, it's going to have a harder profile, but yeah, when I noticed also too with these Hotties is you have to, with the foams in them, you have to put a lot of heat in these tires just to keep them warm. But because other than that, I mean they're kind of all over the place. But I think they run a whole lot better with no belts. Just for a reference for you guys. But yeah, that is that. But I guess what I can do is I can take off the hood here, show you the biggest changes, what I've done so far. And you probably, if you guys are obviously into the no prep stuff, you're on any sort of like Slash or DE page, you've probably seen this car on there a little bit. But yeah, here is the current setup as of right now. Obviously, it looks a wee bit different from the last time you've seen it. I have slimmed down the chassis, is the main, obviously, first thing that I've done. And then what I did was, actually, a buddy of mine actually did this first, so I kind of did a little copycat. But nonetheless, I pretty much just took the transmission and literally just unbolted it and then just flipped it. Just notched out the entire back of the chassis and then just rebolted it back in the same holes that were on the bottom. So the wheelbase doesn't change. Anything doesn't change. Obviously, you're just taking all of the weight from back here to in front of the wheels. So that way your car if it does have a big motor, a big turn, or a big KV motor, it's not just a bar car, which I've seen a lot, which is fine. It is what it is. But obviously, your car would be a little bit faster if it was on the ground and not just on two wheels. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, so currently I'm running a Michaels RC 9000 KV. That's a 540 brushless can. As you can see, it does have pretty good wires. It has 12 gauge wires all the way through. I'm still running the Max 10, so I had to get some 6.5 bullets to 4mm bullets. So that was probably the biggest thing there was I was like, oh shoot, I don't have the ESC for the bullets, but then I found these connectors and it was totally fine. And then for here, what I did was I actually just took some of the screws out and then just braced the trans to the chassis, because you lose a lot of the rigidity when you're cutting up the chassis like this. So I mean, I'm flexing on it pretty good, and there's just very little flex on it. So a lot of people were asking, if it's gonna flex too much, it's fine. It's not a big deal. And then here in the front, what I'm doing is I'm running Backyards RC 2.5 bulkhead. It's a composite 3D printed front bulkhead and then just a riser extension. But yeah, it came out fine, runs good. Obviously you get the shocks a little bit more vertical, so the travel it's going more of up and down, so your suspension is going this way instead of this way. So I was having a big problem with our front tires going so far forward. It was just when it was transferring, it was touching the front of the body, and then it would come down, so the wheelbase would change all the time. So that was a good addition to here. I do know, Drag Race Concepts does have they have a aluminum 0 degree bulkhead, which I was originally going to get, but it was kind of on the coming soon stage. So just hopped on this bandwagon first. Runs great, runs true. Don't have any issues with it so far. I don't think it'll break, but again, I've had this car for over 7.5 years, so I've kind of gotten used to how it acts or how it should act. So I'll flip it around here and show you another thing. So I just got this today and actually just swapped it out. I haven't had a chance to test it out yet. So I actually swapped out the lathe shaft for the Slash and actually swapped it over to a Team Associated slipper style clutch. I didn't have that many problems with the factory clutch. It was just, for me, it was very inconsistent. So if I was doing back-to-back runs, the slippage would get different every single time. It's just because obviously it has a small three little pads. Here, the contact, the surface area is a lot larger. The spring has a little bit more tension, so I would say the adjustability is a lot there. And then this is an STRC shaft, so it's a hardened shaft, so I don't have to worry about that pin breaking. Here's actually the part number that I went with. It's a CNC machine transmission lathe shaft / two-wheel drive Rustler Stampede for an AE clutch. So I actually didn't realize that was that until I ordered it, and I was like, oh shoot, this thing doesn't have another pinhole for the clutch plate. So I was having the typical problem of stabbing the shaft. So what I actually did was I actually took a drill bit and bored out the main pin and then put a wheel axle pin in there. Probably wasn't ideal, but I mean, you're not going to snap that shaft, especially for me having plastic axles. I'm not going to break that. So, and that's another thing too, is a lot of people take their slipper clutch out, which is fine. It's not my build. It's not my car. But if you utilize a slipper clutch, you're, not having all of the power going straight to the axles and breaking them. So people are breaking them left and right. Well, they did a slipper delete and all that power is just going straight to it. And the yokes are boring out the holes on each end and it's just snapping them, which is going to happen. So yeah, so that's what I did for the shaft. This was my friction plate, I guess. It was getting pretty worn, I would say. I flipped it a couple times, but you can see how hot it's getting. It's kind of getting discolored. And then I was using an 83. The pads look still pretty good, but obviously you can see the surface is a third basically. There's only 3 of there, and you could probably fit 3 more in those spaces. But it's pretty much like a brake pad on a car. But the bigger it is, the more stopping power. But for here, the better the friction area is, the more friction you'll have. So still running a 48 pitch. I didn't change that out. Currently running an 81 spur and I believe 18. I actually bought a set of Dynamite pinions with this KV. I've never actually had a KV this high. Probably the highest I've had so far was a 6900. I actually came from a 3800 from a while ago, and I had to gear it so tall. And in between that, I actually had a 3660 Hobby Wing 4600, which I geared the crap out of it, and the thing was a beast. I mean, that thing was crazy fast. But then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go up in the KV so I don't have to gear it as high. And then I bought a 5700, which worked okay. I don't think I had it long enough to chest out enough gearing. And then I bought a 6900, and then the gearing started coming way down. I had to go, up in spur and down in pinion just because they're such a high RPM motor. So from going from that 4600, going from a what was I running, a 7632? I've already basically cut that in half and have a 16 or a 18 pinion and an 81 spur. So I did GPS it, and it did go about 50 with a 16. So that was with a 16 pinion and an 83. So I went down, spur, two teeth, and then up 2 in pinion. So that's about 4 teeth. So if I can hit about 55, I'll be pretty happy with that setup. And I actually do have all of the part numbers for the swap. If you guys are interested in that, I'm pretty sure I'll get a question for it. So the slipper, spring, and washer is 7486. The spur is a 9651, and then your slipper hubs, which are these metal pieces here, are a 7485, and then your slipper pads, the ones I bought, are a 9603. So that'll get you in the right direction. I actually bought this whole kit off of eBay. So the guy actually had the whole kit ready to go, and there's a nut that came with it, but he actually taped it. So I don't actually know the part number for that. So all of those are both of these anodized metal pieces right here, 2 slipper pads, the spur, the spring, and then the spacer. But the nut, I'm not too sure on for the part number. So sorry guys, can't help you there. But yeah, we'll go to the rear of the car. So yeah, this threw off a lot of people when I posted it in this last page. A lot of people were asking about it. I'm still running the axial extensions. So obviously they're reversed. And then I'm actually running them pretty much vertical. So it's pretty soft. I actually have the softest spring rating on here, which is the blue. So it's pretty soft. I mean, obviously, as you can see. And then I kind of retrofitted the sway bar. This is a hot racing sway bar. So what I did was I had it on here before, but I actually had it mounted up here. But what it was doing was there was so much of a pitch on the sway bar, it was tensioning, and the shocks couldn't work. So I was like, I need to find a different way to make it a little bit more horizontal. And that way the sway bar can actually do its job and twist where it needs to do. Now this actually allows me to run my shocks a little bit softer, and it when it's digging, it can stay true and it doesn't go all over the place. What I've noticed was that if I didn't have a sway bar on here, the shocks had to be so hard just to keep it going straight. Now I'm able to kind of adjust it a little bit. I don't have to run my shocks all the way down, and I can run a lighter spring rate so it can stay digging. And also the wheelie bar, I don't actually need a wheelie bar anymore because all of my weight transfers in the middle now, and there's so much weight up front. It would take a lot of motor to to lift all that weight up front. So it's actually just on here for insurance purposes, just in case I hit a pothole and the front end comes up and doesn't flip over and smash my body. But I am still running a RC10 10-inch wheelie bar, and I have it mounted up to a hot racing mid-motor chassis. I guess it's not a plate, but a bracket. I guess it's a good way to say it. And this kind of, pretty much is a Frankenstein car. It took me about 6 to 8 months to get here after just buying multiple parts and just kind of figuring out what I wanted to run. And then these little washers here, because this chassis is pretty narrow. So obviously this bar isn't meant for this. So I had to put 4 spacers on each side. And these actually are the middle pieces for the sway bar. So I actually have these ran down all the way. So you can see that. So those actually were in the middle there. I just took them out and actually had 4 of them, and I found the perfect place for them, which is for the wheelie bar. So, but yeah, that's pretty much all of the updates on the chassis so far. It's running pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. I got to button up some stuff. Get a little zip tie there. I am probably going to order a bigger ESC. This is 120 amp. It'll push it. It does fine. But I want a little bit more of an amp. So I may switch it over to about 150, 160 amp. For my budget, I can't really afford the, R1 Works and the XR10 Pro and all the big ones, which are, 220 amps, which are great. They're all great ESCs, but kind of wanted to do this build on a budget. So just kind of wanted to give an update on everything. But yeah, thanks guys for subscribing. I saw a couple of new folks subscribe to the channel. I know I need to kind of do a little bit more content to keep the channel going, but I'll throw the body back on here if I can get it to fit. It's always a fun part. Okay, there we go. There we go. But yeah, you can do this on the budget, especially if you have a lot of extra parts like I do, and kind of figure out what works best for you. It does for this no prep stuff. It does take a lot of testing. I will say that. I've tested a lot in the past couple of months just to kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. Oh yeah, that was one thing I did do was put these pins back in here. I did change out the bearings because I was going about, I don't know, 5 years probably on the same bearings. So I'm gonna put these in the back. And yeah, they were pretty much shot. You could definitely feel some of the bearings were just missing out of the bearings themselves. But obviously, if you can have less resistance as possible, the better it'll roll, the quicker it'll be. And I just bought some bearings off Amazon. Just bought a whole pack of them. I haven't changed any in the transmission. Those still look pretty good. Had a lot of grease in there, so those should be fine for a while. And before I put the motor back in, I spun the rear end, and it was pretty free. So, but yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them below, and I'll try to get back to you. But yeah, thanks guys. We'll catch you on the flip side.